What's this? Yet another Warhammer game? Well, yes, but this one's different from the last dozen or so. With an open beta for Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin kicking off this weekend, Games Workshop's renewed fantasy universe is being thrown into the spotlight, showcasing everything that is new and different about their fantasy world. We've had an early hands-on with the content from this weekend's open beta, throwing the Stormcast Eternals and Orruk Kruleboyz into the fray to find out what is new and different about not just this game, but the Warhammer fantasy world in general. And that's what I want to start this video by talking about, because one of the biggest hurdles for Realms of Ruin is simply telling and showing people what the heck Warhammer Age of Sigmar actually is. Games Workshop completely rebooted their fantasy wargame back in 2015, and while some at the time might have hoped that this was just a momentary blip that would soon be reset, like, I don't know, that time Dr. Octopus became Spider-Man for 18 months, what the hell was that about? The company has stuck with it. We're now 8 years into this era, we're onto the second edition of the tabletop game, but to me it still feels like this is still a relatively new setting, and it will be largely unfamiliar to a lot of people out there. While it is not the first video game in the Age of Sigmar setting, Realms of Ruin is by far the biggest budget example of this, and it gets to be the grand video game introduction to this new world order. As complete an overhaul of the Warhammer mythos as Age of Sigmar is, it's immediately clear to see how it takes inspiration from Norse and Greek mythology, as well as shifting towards the style of Warhammer 40,000. Sigmar has been elevated and lifted up to the position of God King through the downfall of the world that was, creating a pantheon of gods around himself and bringing back mortal civilizations that initially dwelled across 8 distinct realms hovering in the ether. Of course, chaos still existed. They had, after all, effectively destroyed the old world, and their repeated incursions into this new set of realms forced the Pantheon Order back into their shell, and predominantly into the realm of Azir. But there is still hope in this world, and that is thanks to the Stormcast Eternals. This is an army made up of the resurrected souls of fallen heroes, reforged into, well, okay, look, they're fantasy space marines and they're shiny and gold. As they venture into Gur, seeking to reclaim the realm of beasts, they go up against some of Warhammer World's classic foes, the Orruk Kruleboyz, which are orcs with even less of a chance at an elementary school spelling bee. These are the 2 factions that we got to go hands-on with, which will make up 2 of the 4 that will feature in Realms of Ruin, and we also got to check out an opening single-player mission before diving into multiplayer battles that will be the centrepiece of this week's open beta test. In the grand spectrum of Games Workshop video games, this is a strategy title, and so in that regard, it is closer to the tabletop games than, I don't know, Darktide, for example. Realms of Ruin, though, is far closer to Dawn of War 2 than it is to Total War Warhammer, and a big part of that is down to the changes to the tabletop game setting, which focuses on smaller units and speedier matches with looser positioning for your character models instead of lining up in rank-and-file regiments as we used to see in Warhammer Fantasy. The single-player mission was just a good introduction to the basic mechanics of this game, putting us in charge of a handful of Stormcast units, showing how to use abilities, take control over the battlefield, and preserve your forces. It really is very Dawn of War in these aspects, as you look to capture and hold key points on the battlefield, and then build structures on top of them to help control the space and the territory in the map. Fights, though, are largely hand-to-hand because of the difference in setting, and the Stormcast are powerful, if small in numbers. When things start to go south for you, you can very quickly issue a retreat order that makes the unit invulnerable as they sprint back to base, ready to be reinforced. There's 2 resources to accumulate and spend. There's Command, which is accrued from the territory held, and there's Realmstone, which is harvested from control points. And these go towards buying more units, defensively strengthening or more heavily exploiting those capture points for resources, and also upgrading your base camp, which is just a single structure, but then unlocks further and more advanced units for you to buy. You've also got the ability to upgrade units and unlock their special abilities. But you also spend these resources in one other area, and this is where I didn't quite gel with Realms of Ruin during my hands-on time, because you are spending resources to use abilities. What I didn't quite gel with during the game preview time was how these resources are also used for abilities. The basic Stormcast Liberators can strengthen their resolve and become tougher in a fight for a short period, but that uses up a lot of Realmstone relative to what is required for simply strengthening control points and buying higher tiered units, rather than using a separate resource for ability uses or simply having them on a cooldown. Similarly, you can replenish units back at base, but that costs enough that you should only ever consider doing so when you've got at least 3 units stood within the range, instead of having a unit by unit feed to replenish individual people. In general, having abilities with a cost does provide some added depth to the strategic gameplay and the relatively traditional triangle of strengths and weaknesses. It forces you to decide if spending to win a particular skirmish is worthwhile, or if you'd be better off saving to jump up a unit tier. But I'm not yet sure of the cost balance that Frontier has settled on at this point, and it can feel as though using abilities punishes you by then not being able to strengthen your army in general. What I do know is that in one of the matches I was completely obliterated. I had absolutely no hope after losing a whole boatload of territory right at the start of the match, and unfortunately that meant I had no way of coming back into that fight. What's just as crucial to get right is the balance between the different control systems, because you're not just getting this game on PC, it's also simultaneously releasing on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. Keyboard and mouse controls are naturally going to be the go-to for PC gaming, but we tried out the gamepad controls for this demo and the new direct step scheme that Frontier has concocted. Direct step is a really interesting new approach to how an RTS can control on console. It's based around locking the camera to a particular unit and then issuing moves by creating a chain of quick-fire waypoints. You can very quickly jump between individual units and control groups as well, and considering the generally low unit count, it is an intriguing option for a relatively manageable army size. The main weakness that I feel is that when you want to send units all the way across the map, that is dozens of these links in the chain, and that is what largely pushed me back towards just relying on the traditional console RTS control scheme, where the cursor is locked to the middle of the screen and you've just got full camera control. There will also be mouse and keyboard support on console, so that is another option. And because of this, everyone will be coexisting online, which has me a little bit worried about the balance of any competitive scene that this game sparks up. But then, that's what this week's beta is trying to figure out as well. On the whole, we've got this game where Warhammer Age of Sigmar is still finding its way into the collective consciousness, and where Realms of Ruin is sure to be many gamers' first exposure to this rebooted fantasy setting. And so, with all of that thematic change and new content in mind, it's pretty much a good thing that the RTS foundations that it builds upon are tried and true examples of the genre. That allows the rest of the universe to flourish within this setting, and for the more individual touches and innovations like the direct step controls to take the spotlight, and for Frontier to really hone their game around these ideas. If you want to check out Realms of Ruin for yourself, then the open beta is kicking off across all platforms, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC, on the 7th of July. That's just 2 days from now. And you can play all the way through the weekend until the end of the 10th of July. If you're not free this weekend, then there is another beta planned for later this summer as well. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen in this video, and if you have done so, please make sure to like, subscribe, share, do all the usual YouTube things, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!
Death to foes of Sigmar! Ready to crush the foe!
Ready, bolts.
Push on for the glory of Sigmar. We have found them.